we have to go with like a pink shade.
But it should be like a pastel pink.
Well, but then like you can't.
Yeah, I guess it can't be too.
Can't be too light. It's more orangey. That good? Or is that too purpley?
I was gonna say it could be red. That's good.
It work. Alright, that's okay. I can see it at least up here.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, what are you recognizing so far, at least her view of American culture?
I think she kind of views it as like trivial and like not necessarily meaningful, but not very like it's like people seem to be concerned with like surface level association of value.
Okay, and so, I mean, obviously, she's using the flamingo as like her main way of expressing this, but Price's view of American culture, superficial?
Yeah.
Okay. So superficial, shallow, you said like primary concern with wealth? I don't know, Chandler, I kind of like this pink shade. You might have to keep this one. Okay. By using words superficial, shallow, you're kind of getting a negative tone to it. Not meaning that all Americans therefore are bad, but not certainly not a positive kind of thing. All right. What else? Oh, that's a good starting point. Are we still that way?
Yeah.
Oh well. So it goes.
Yeah, this was written 20 years ago.
To live is to suffer. I would.
It goes.
I was gonna say I think we've maybe made progress in the last 20 years in some ways with that. I don't know. I feel like 20 years ago, if I were in your shoes, 20 years plus some, that we were more concerned with like, and we still are to an extent, name brand, price, things like that. I mean, yes, Nina still has her swoosh on and all those kinds of things, and with clothes, I do think, and while we're still concerned about those things, certainly to some extent, I do think in 2019, we also like to kind of celebrate a bargain, maybe more so than 20 years ago. Easy, it has nothing to do with clothes, but I think like something like Aldi is a good example. When we first started shopping at Aldi, it was when Mrs. Kane wasn't working, Addie was just born, and didn't have as much money and all that kind of stuff. So rather than Giant Eagle down the road, drove the extra mile and a half to go to Aldi. And it wasn't that people were going, oh my goodness, you shop there, how dare you? But it wasn't the trend that it is kind of, now. Now that's less than 20 years ago. But I do think because we've had more options, we kind of look for things. Yeah, brands still count, but you know what? If I can get Mrs. Kane that knockoff Michael Kors purse where the symbol looks just about the same, that will be good enough.
Amazon's really good for knockoffs.
Yeah.
Well, and I said compared to like 20 years ago or whatever, in 1997, Mr. Kane wasn't going to Amazon because it wasn't there in that regard. If I wanted to purchase something, I had to physically go to the store. It sell books because that was an easy way to start to get consumer info. But the options weren't there quite as much. Anything to add onto this then, so far as superficial, shallow? Why does the pink flamingo then, the plastic pink flamingo, become a good representation or example of this? You said brighter than a real one, and then I lost you after that.
Because it doesn't, and then, like, it doesn't even really need to be brighter than a real flamingo. They're already are bright, but
Okay, so it's like over the top. We're going to go language enrichment. We'll say something like ostentatious, more than is necessary. Okay. So when it comes to the passage, and leave this up here for a second, when it would come to the passage, the part in the second column where it goes, and do you even need to call it the pink flamingo, as if it could be, any other color, that would be a part that would start to now kind of emphasize that, hey, we have this need for going over the top. Right here. Because if you were to simply say, hey, there's a flamingo, we know it's pink. But we're going to make it as pink can be. Now, what would be, again, without saying devices yet at this point, or at least don't need to, a hotter pink than a real flamingo, and even though that real one is brighter than anything else around it, what would be other places here within the passage where you feel that, okay, that superficial, ostentatious, over-the-top sentiment starts to get communicated?
Talking about how in Las Vegas they have the hotel and on line 25 it says, well, line 24, anyone who has seen Las Vegas knows that a flamingo stands out in a desert even more strikingly than on a lawn.
Okay. I mean, with the lawn, you have green, and even like in the natural habitat, more subtropical, you're going to have it. So, okay, now it's going to jump out. And you mentioned the point that this is Las Vegas. Where else are we going to be seeing pink flamingos? Miami. Generally in the South is when you kind of think about it. South Beach, especially, the architects employ playful Art Deco. Back in New Jersey, Union Products flamingo inscribed lawns emphatically with Florida's cachet of leisure and extravagance. New England is going to reproduce it and send it out across the inland sea of grass, which is basically going to be the entire, U.S. of A countryside. So it's not that this is something that's just endemic to a certain area, but they are going to be all over. I think it's right up the road from Brewster's on Rochester. If you go past BP Brewster's, you're coming up towards Perry. There's a house on the left that I think has like a couple pink flamingos, just like within the garden. And it's like there currently. It's not a summertime thing. It's just there's always the pink flamingo. There's probably other houses you can think of in neighborhoods that, if it's not a pink flamingo, some kind of lawn decoration that is screaming attention to it, even though it's not really necessary. Yeah. We'll put some pink flamingos right around. Well, and even with the pink flamingo, I mean, we have certainly not bought one, but I'm sure come Christmas time you can find pink flamingos with Santa hats on, or pink flamingos pulling, the sleigh and all that kind of stuff with it. So certainly the location of where the places are, this is going everywhere. And we want something that is certainly going to stand out more so. So hey, a bleak desert landscape, let's throw in a little bit of pink, flashing lights of Las Vegas. Now we're going to pull attention into it. What else? Grant?
There's like an ironic tone to some things. Like, for example, line 13
Mhm.
says, this was a little ironic since Americans had hunted flamingos to extinction in Florida in the late 1800s for clones of meat, but no matter.
Okay, so, which kind of sounds like so it goes. So it goes. Anyway, here we go. So there's, you have like, not a shift, but certainly a change in the syntax. Kind of emphasizes, but who cares? In the 1950s, the interstates would draw everyone together, and now New Jersey was sending these out. You said there's a little bit of irony, and Jesse kind of chuckled when you said line 13. This was a little ironic. Hey, you're not going to get punished if you take note of the irony. All right. If they give you a little cue, like, do you notice the irony here? By all means, feel free to use it. Now, certainly that doesn't mean that you have to use irony as an example, but if there is something that is blatant and you can connect it to the argument, by all means, go ahead and use it. If there's something where they go, and alluding to the Declaration of Independence, they said alluding to, so that takes out allusion. No, you can certainly use it, especially with this passage. how are they really checking to see, do you understand what the writer's trying to do? It's going to be more so with that argument that she's utilizing. So if generally they give you the argument and you find the devices, if they give you some devices because you have to find the argument, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's any easier than what a typical passage would be. I think if you were to, in the second column here, we're like lines 34, 35, 36, where we get all the different types of hues and colors that are being used. Well, that's kind of too obvious to use imagery. I don't want to use that one now. No, you could use irony down here, imagery up here, and you could still have a successful essay because you're the one that's identifying what that overall argument is going to be. What is the irony with it? With the part that you were bringing here in 13 through like 16?
Well, just the fact, just the fact that they're trying to bring it back after killing it in the first place.
We got rid of it, now we want it again. And when we bring it back, what are we going to do? Which this would kind of go to what Jesse was talking about before. We're going to make it bigger, better, brighter than any time before. Why was it used in the 1800s when it was basically, ended? For plumes and meat. What's a plume?
It's like
Feathers.
Yeah, it's like feathers for dress, for decor, for decoration. So it wasn't necessarily out of necessity. Certainly, maybe for some the meat was, but for plumes and meat, so it was for show. We were over the top with show because we killed it off. And you know what? We killed it off. Well, let's make more, and let's get bigger, better, than ever before. Notice you have a little bit of parallelism here for plumes and meat, since we're kind of talking about syntax. Now, now that it's on one's lawn, emphatically with Florida's cachet of leisure and extravagance. So what is it a symbol of? Those things that we, maybe did not have before. 1950s, why would people get all excited to show off some examples of leisure and extravagance?
Because after the Great Depression.
Great Depression, World War II, things have been kind of tough. Hey, now let's show off what we have. What would be an iconic figure who wanted to show off what he had?
Apparently Elvis Presley.
Well, it doesn't say he bought a pink flamingo, although he very well could have. He still made sure to get a pink Cadillac because the pink was certainly the color of the day where we're going to get as bright as possible. Since Grant mentioned irony and talking about how it's used for plumes and leisure extravagance, historically, how was the flamingo represented, or what did it represent? All right.
Red Phoenix.
Associated with red phoenix, major motif in art, dance, and literature. And while there's a variety of reasons here, I would say these are a little bit more serious or substantial. Cultural icons with it, as opposed to, let's just stake it in the lawn. Not to go all Invisible Man here. Who said that? American culture, we like to think of, not as a paint bucket, but we've certainly talked about as melting pot, blend of cultures. What are we doing with our blend of cultures? If this is a major motif in Mexican and Caribbean art, if this is something that was important to early Christians and even Egyptians and things like that, but now it's an ornament on our lawn. What do you mean by?
Kind of like taking from another culture and taking the meaning away from it.
Okay, so we're not celebrating originally what it is, but we're kind of taking it for ourselves and giving it our own spin, which in some ways kind of lessens that value that was going to it. So if we're going with, hey, superficial, shallow, primarily concerned with being able to kind of show wealth, fake, flashy, over the top, ostentatious, hey, what a great idea. Now let's use it for this. Let's kind of take away the significance, the original significance behind it, and now utilize it for something else. So now with the examples that we have highlighted here, from a device standpoint, what would be things that we could certainly utilize? Grant's already told us one. We could certainly go with irony. What would be other terms that we could use for it? Not for the irony example, but other, rhetorical devices that we could incorporate. Imagery. Are you thinking the colors primarily that were getting mentioned?
Yeah, and like the Las Vegas thing.
Okay, yep. So we got the list of colors. Vegas with the desert, describing the lawn. One thing about the colors, if we're talking about, with that whole taking what we want and making it for ourselves, it's a little ironic too that Congo ruby would be one of those colors. So you're taking Congo, imperialism, place where resources have been stripped for more material wealth, that same kind of idea. The green one was a green methyl.
Methyl green.
That sounds like a terrible color.
Yeah.
I don't know what the shade of it would be, but it has like that chemical.
So does boiling magenta.
Yeah, all the colors actually sound pretty terrible with it. Is that just what it is, Mountain Dew green? Is that methyl green?
Electric green.
Radioactive green?
Yeah.
My princess happened to put like water in it, and it looked weird because like the liquid inside is also it's just like slightly green.
I feel like when he gets a bloody nose, there's like green.
Yeah.
Irony, imagery. What else?
Like symbolism
With the bird itself.
and or just the color.
Okay, so symbolism of bird / color. Going back to irony, and you were kind of alluding to it even before class began. What's the title of the piece?
The plastic PinkFlamingo.
The plastic PinkFlamingo is anything but natural. So, even that idea you could certainly kind of start to utilize with it. So, again, if Grant goes with that, hey, this ironic twist, but then you're layering extra things on top of it, that's certainly going to give you some substance that you can use. That last part of the second column, early Christians, Egyptians, illusions, Elvis Presley. So you could even go with like some iconic illusions that would be taking place. There we go. When that but no matter, you might even take a look at some of the things that she does syntactically to kind of emphasize certain points with it. So there we go. So syntax would be something that you could use. Details would obviously be something that you could utilize as well. So you're not, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a case of I don't know what devices I would use with it, but it's which examples do you really feel would best help your cause. So when it comes to Friday, if you have to identify an argument, because they don't always tell you what it is, if you have to identify the argument, that's job number one. Job number two, now what are going to be the examples from the passage that are going to help you best explain that argument. Don't go, hey, I know there's imagery there, I know there's details there, I know there's some type of special diction here, I'm going to make that work. Make sure that your examples fit in with what you want the argument to be. Then figure out what are those examples that you're ultimately utilizing. And remember, thesis statement, we'd be going SPA, strategy, purpose, argument. So certainly you want to try to highlight what would be a pretty good purpose. What's that verb that the author would be trying to use to get across? I don't think you're going to have an issue locating the places on Friday. I think it's just making sure that the explanation, you do that aspect, then everything else I think pretty much is going to take care of itself. And keep in mind, generally with these, I don't want to say the passage is straightforward, but it's not that you're doing literary analysis so far as like covering a big lengthy word, like with Invisible Man or even Slaughterhouse 5. You're just dealing with a passage, so only focus on stuff that they provide. It's not that you have to try to infer, assume what would be things from other chapters later on in the book or things like that, because you're only going with this. All right. So tomorrow, pass it back to multiple choice, we'll kind of go over those things. And then, yeah, Friday, we're gonna come in, there'll be a prompt, there'll be line paper. Check in with Sam, Ben, see what they did, and then you can go, well, I won't worry about that. I'll be here. Hey, at least we made it through the class with a smart